maybe we can get started here. And Bert,
Yes,
you're signed in both on your iPhone and your iPad.
I'm turning off the iPhone. Oh, that's the problem. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, folks.
Not a problem.
Better?
Two masks are better than one.
Thank you.
I think that resolved our audio feedback as well.
One's not good enough.
That's interesting. Oh, so Going Solar 101, this is his, no, that's the title for this. Seventh principle. So I have a big screen here that says Going Solar 101 and then
Yep.
gallery of
Yep.
everyone else. That's what it's going to be, right?
Yep.
So, okay. Okay, so yeah, like I said, John, there he is.
Jack's getting out.
Hi.
Hi, Irene.
Jack's getting out.
We're neighbors.
Yeah, I see them walking with their dog past our place frequently.
What is that brown bar going in front of your head, Irene?
Me? Let me check and see.
No, it's right there, like right in front of you. You can grab it.
Oh, I know. It's the, look at that. It's a
Oh,
light.
the light. Okay.
Yeah, it's a lamp here.
Okay.
I'll try to turn it around. Okay, because you don't need to see me that well, right? That's a little better. Okay,
Well, it's Wednesday. It's hump day, so we get to see everybody.
that's right. That's right. Okay, well, I got, yeah, no, it's so good to hear you and in front of all of us, John.
I don't know, we can't.
Thank
see,
you,
but
Irene.
there's 17
Yeah.
people signed up.
Yeah.
So we can only, because.
I know, John, let me just tell you, I know John from a neighborhood group that he set up in order to investigate solar panels on the school parking lot. That was kind of a co-op thing, but he knows the SLP, it's a conundrum, I think, working with them, right, John?
Yeah, SRP conundrum?
SRP, right.
Yes. Yeah, I
So-
used to work at SRP too.
Uh-huh. So,
You're taking away all my thunder, Irene.
okay, I'll shut up.
Well, actually, I thought that was a fairly good introduction and so I'm going to turn it over to you, John, and I'm going to suggest that all of us mute ourselves unless we want to ask a question. And John, why don't you sort of outline how you'd like to do the presentation, especially relative to questions along the way.
If you have a question along the way, you can just let me know. I might notice you doing like this or something. I have two screens on my computer set up so that if I look like I'm staring off into the distance, it's my other screen I'm staring at. So please don't take it personally that I'm not looking at you. But also that just means that I may not be aware that you're raising your hand. So give me a moment to do that, or just take yourself off of mute and start yelling at me. That works too. I've got teenagers and I yell at them and they don't pay attention. So it kind of works both ways. So if I guess everyone's kind of done their own sound check and everything, so we can go ahead and get started. So again, this is the Going Solar 101. Bill shared with me the seventh principle, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence in which we are a part. And I think there's, some really powerful statement there. It's a lot broader than I think you can, the more you think about it, the more you can keep thinking about it. Let me just leave it at that. Moving along. So my background, like Irene, of course, as she already pointed out in the first bullet point, I used to work for SRP. We considered ourselves good guys when I was at SRP compared to APS, but it's just whatever your choice is, wherever you live. I've been a consultant in the energy and electric cooperative industry for about 20 years now, or I have about 20 years experience in that field. So I may be talking to people who know more about it than I do. It's not uncommon that there are people with a lot more knowledge than I have. And so I'm not trying to say that I'm the one who knows everything. I just, just taking a stab in the sunlight, trying to get something going, really, in many respects. Through my work with electric cooperatives, I am also working on this group called the Access Project. It's an NRECA, is a National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, which is an association that represents about 900 electric cooperatives in 48 states. There aren't any cooperatives in Rhode Island and, well, I forget the other state. It's not Massachusetts anymore, but it's right over in that area. So Arizona has cooperatives with Navapache up near Pine Top Lakeside. You go down to Trico, which is around in Marana, that circles around Tucson. And then on the eastern side of the state, there's quite a few more down the bottom eastern corner. And then there's one up in Mojave, or Bullhead City in Mojave County. And so there are electric cooperatives here, but we also have SRP that takes a large territory, and APS, Arizona Public Service, that takes up a lot of the state. But through that group, they started a project with the Department of Energy called Access, which is an abbreviation for a whole lot of words that I forget at the time. It's basically how to expand solar options to their members that are low to moderate income consumers. The Department of Energy did a lot of studies, have done a lot of studies, and they calculated that the energy burden from people who are low to moderate income is quite high. And so on a percentage basis, if you think about it, a larger percentage of their income goes to paying utility bills than for most of us, because their utility bills aren't going to be less just because they're poor. That has no relationship to your utility bill. It's usually just how well your house is built and the living conditions you have. And so that's a project that we're working on across the country, including cooperatives in California, Washington State, North Carolina, and in Oklahoma. As also the other part of the thunder that Irene stole from me, thanks again. We co-founder with my wife of CLIP. It's the Community Climate Livability Project here in Tempe. This is a project we started about 2 years ago, to investigate the ability to put rooftop solar on many neighbors on their homes, buying it as a cooperative, so we'd get a better price, but also managing it as a cooperative so that we can maybe use our size and grow it to other communities to increasingly have influence over how our generation is produced. So we don't want to just, if we were 5,000 people with our own rooftop solar, that would be lovely, okay? It would be beautiful. But if you have 5,000 people with their own rooftop solar who are also organized together, then that becomes dangerous to the utilities, because then you can actually have some type of control over the market, which they monopolize. And that's kind of our big vision and dream right there at the end. And then finally, I'm also a member of the Arizona Cooperative Initiative. We're a group of people that work throughout the state working to promote the cooperative business model. And those last two, we do a little bit on Twitter, and we have a web page. I think I'm about the youngest person on there, so we're not necessarily technologically advanced. That's kind of about as good as we get right there. I can break a website, I cannot build one. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and get started into the good stuff though here. So today's agenda, Bill asked me to cover a little bit of background about the solar marketplace. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, kind of what's going on here in the state. And then we kind of want to go more into the understanding the why you want to do this, because we want to create a strategic direction and a vision statement, what your mission is, why you want to do what you want to do. And I'll go back to the groups that I'm already a part of and talk about their mission statement and how that makes a difference in their process going forward. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about CLIP and some of the things we're doing here, a little bit, expand on it a little bit, and talk about what's going on in the state of Arizona when it comes to some of our choices and how they're being limited in some ways. So from a high level perspective, there are, and I'm sorry, my mouse goes crazy. There are 10, these are the top 10 suppliers of solar panels in the world. And if you look, a lot of them are from China. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. But when I think about this, I think about the things you have to consider: corporate philosophy and transparency. What are the goals of that organization? What do they stand behind? Whether it comes to how they treat the environment, how they treat labor, how transparent they are from their materials perspective and how they work. Then again, we also have international trade restrictions and tariffs. Even though Donald Trump's no longer in office, a lot of his tariffs with China are still in place. And so that impacts the cost of everything coming from China. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. It's just, this is the kind of thing it has to align with what your vision is and what your purpose is. And then there's the technological advancements. Some of these organizations are really cutting edge, and some of them are really mass producers. And so if your focus is on cutting edge, then your technology is going to continue to increase efficiencies. Whereas if you're a mass producer, you're just worried about trying to get out there and getting as many panels out as possible. So I can't tell you which ones are best at what. I mean, the top U.S. corporation on here is First Solar, and they have corporate offices right here in Tempe. So that's a good thing, I think. You may notice on there is nothing that says Tesla. That's because Tesla buys all their panels from Panasonic, and Panasonic's not even on here any longer. They've actually fallen down. The reason, at least as I understand it, these suppliers do a lot of large industrial projects. And so they'll put in thousands of panels at one time to create megawatts worth of solar power. That's not exactly what we're doing on a rooftop. What we do on a rooftop is a lot less. And so comparatively speaking, if you're focused on rooftop as your market, then you're going to sell a lot less. And this is ranked based on the amount of energy, panels of energy that they put out. Okay. And of course, it's from Wikipedia. So, you can only trust it as far as Wikipedia goes. I looked at probably 15 different websites and blogs trying to figure out this list. And too many other places looked like they were sales places. They were trying to sell something and not necessarily trying to talk about information. So that's why I went with Wikipedia. All right. So just in Arizona, if you do a quick run with a corporation commission, you'll find there's 1,342 registered solar contractors in Arizona. So there's one for each of us, maybe a few for each of us. There are at least 532 contractors that are purely domestic, meaning they were organized here in the state of Arizona. So there's a lot. We know there's an organization down in Tucson called Technicians for Sustainability that happens to be a worker-owner cooperative that does solar installations. And but they're in Tucson. They don't like to drive up I-10 and bring their stuff up here. I would love to find somebody to do something like that for us up here, though. Looking at the Tesla Sunrun side of the equation, those are the large organizations that you can go into, hop on their website, plug in your address, tell them how much you spend on electricity, and they will give you a quote almost instantly for how much it will cost to put something on your rooftop. And it's done, sort of. I mean, they still have to come out and do inspections. On the other end of the spectrum, there are smaller shops. The folks on the Tesla Sunrun area, they'll do thousands of installations every year. The folks on the local vendors, if they do 200, 250 installations, they're doing well. And that's what they do. And so the local guys come out and they typically will look at your house and be much more specific and try to tailor it more exactly to what they think you should be getting, as opposed to this large cookie cutter approach that Tesla might do. No matter who you use, you have to get clearance from the municipality and utility before proceeding. Okay, no matter who. There's a lot of danger in solar energy when you produce it on your rooftop if you're not adequately and correctly connected to the grid. If the power were to go out in your neighborhood and you still had generation coming off your rooftop, the electricity could feed back into the system. And when someone goes out to work on the power line, it would actually end up causing an electrocution. And so we don't want that to happen. And so they put stoppers, they put, they put devices around your meter so that electricity cannot backflow into the grid if the grid itself is down. That means that if you don't have a grid that's operable when your solar panels are working, you also don't have electricity in your home. So your panels have been shut off to your own meter. So then you have to buy another special piece of equipment that would allow you to use your own electricity while stopping it from leaving your meter. And so it's one additional step. The most simple step is just to be connected where you're still working through their meter. And then it takes a step further to have it to where you're safely connected, where you can still use your own solar power generated while the system is down, while the grid is not functional. And so that's another additional step. And so that costs more. All this costs more from the consumer perspective, even though it gives you much more reliability. You must consider the current condition of the roof or whatever surface you happen to be putting your solar panels on. They would not do it on my roof right now. I guarantee you. I have about a 24-year-old roof, shingles, and we're about to replace it. They'll be really happy in a couple months, but right now they would not touch it. And then they also offer different forms of financing. Different companies will have leasing options. They'll have buying options. You name it, they'll figure out some way to get solar on your house today. And so that's kind of the process that from a residential perspective you end up following. There are tax incentives for residential. Right now, it's like, I believe it's still 26%. I think they increased it back to 26% for 2021 because of COVID. It was supposed to go down to 20%, but I think instead they kept it at 26%. And I say, and declining because next year it's supposed to go down. Now we'll see what happens under the Biden administration, whether or not these tax incentives continue to go down. But keeping in mind, these tax incentives are great for you and I, but they don't really work for people who are low to moderate income, who don't really have the taxes that they're having to offset. And so it's harder for folks like that to actually lessen their own energy burden. Both of the utilities offer different rate plans, and you got to be really careful as to which rate plan you end up choosing, because it can have a big impact on what you get in return for the energy that you're producing for them. So this part, batteries included. If you're an SRP customer, you can get a battery on your roof to tie into your rooftop or without. You don't even have to have solar to have a battery on your home. And honestly, I think that's a really good idea to have a battery in your home with this particular type of rate. They'll give you up to $3,600 back on the installation of your battery. It'll still cost you about $14,000, and then they'll give you, well, $16,000, and then they give you $3,600 back. And I think you end up getting put on a rate that's different than your regular residential rate, and it offers a lot of advantages. So far, there are 2,913 reservations still available. So there's enough for all of us through May 1st, 2021. So there's not much time left for this rebate method, a rebate system that SRP is offering. By the way, SRP is not offering this out of the kindness of the heart. They were taken to court and lost. That is why they're doing this. It's not because they're the good guys. It's because they got sued by Tesla and Solar City, and they could not prove that they were not acting in a monopolistic way. For APS customers, they have a thing called APS storage rewards. I don't live in APS territory, and I never worked there, so I'm not as familiar with them. But their program right now is closed, so they're not taking any new sign-ons at this time. Any questions so far? Most of y'all probably know a lot of this stuff, right? You've already heard this before.
John, I have a question about your comment about batteries for storage, even if you don't have solar. How does it work?
Well, so the battery for storage, let me see. It works on your own home. The way it would work is that, I'm going to ask you a personal question. What does your rates look like do you have a time of use rate plan by chance?
I'm on time of use.
Okay, so I am too. My time of use is from 3 to 6 in the afternoon.
Thank you.
Is that like yours? And
Yes.
so what you would do is you would use before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like right now, what we do is kind of the same thing as battery storage. I run my AC in the summertime down around 52 degrees. up until, no, I'm joking. We keep it around 70. We keep it around 70 up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then it goes up to 84, and then it goes back down to 70. And it struggles anyway. So there's no, it's not like we're not living in like it doesn't feel like North Dakota inside my house in the summertime. Well, what the battery, and so in essence, you're using your house as a battery to store the cold air. Okay. You're just using your electricity in the time in which SRP likes you to use your electricity because it lessens their overall system cost. The battery does the same thing. They would simply recharge the battery all night long and during the day. So SRP has this problem right now with electric generation that takes place in the middle of the afternoon because of solar panels. So there's so much solar energy that comes into their grid that they have to turn off every power plant they have except for Palo Verde, the nuclear reactor out there in West Phoenix. They get so much electricity from solar. What this allows them to do is dispatch all that electricity that's coming into the system, and instead of having to turn Palo Verde down, instead they send it to the batteries. And so the batteries become a place where they can store the power as they see fit. And so if you buy the battery with SRP and they have control over it like this, that's what they would do with it. And in return, they would offer an incentive back to you for cheaper electricity at other times of the day. They have a similar rate structure for if you have a Tesla or some other type of electric vehicle, where they want you to recharge your car overnight. Okay, so they don't want you to do anything between 3 and 6 in the afternoon, but they want you to do whatever you can at all those other hours. Does that make sense? Okay, any other questions like that?
Yes, I had a question about the name of the piece of equipment that you said was needed to allow you to use your solar if the grid is down. What is that called?
It's like an emergency disconnect. I can't remember. There's a few different names for them out there, but it's like an emergency disconnect. Anybody else happen to know what this I can look it up. I forget right now. It's
okay.
I can find out for sure.
Yeah.
You have solar right now?
No. I'm one of the ones that has come on from the one of the local churches in Sun City that's considering putting on solar. And so you're going to be covering commercial later. Is that accurate, or is this all residential today?
We're about to hit commercial next.
Okay.
Just stealing my thunder. You're right there with Irene. Folks, y'all just, no. All right. So this is a situation, like you said, for residential though. And the only reason I'm covering this is because Bill asked me to do the background on the 101. And so that's kind of where that is. For commercial installations, APS and SRP have different programs. Again, I'm much more Sun City. If you're in Sun City, I think you're an APS customer.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can't necessarily speak to that. Both of their systems, the way they work for commercial customers, and a commercial customer is simply something. Most residential customers have a meter and have a power box on the have the breaker box on the outside of their house that allows up to 200 amps, maybe 250 amps for most residential services. These large commercials would have a series of 200 amp breakers or 200 amp systems, or simply just larger amperage type of type of transformers outside their properties. That's the main difference between commercial and residential, is just how much electricity they can take at any one time. SRP has a program, and there was an email that was sent out where they were giving incentives for solar panels to be put on 501c3s. I don't know how easy it is to apply for that program. I have a feeling that it's mostly, if you look at the people who have received that, there are nonprofits that have missions that everyone can get behind, like saving animals, helping veterans, and things like this. And not that there's nothing that's, I don't know, nothing's religious related. I don't see any of that. I have a feeling that they would be maybe leery of doing anything specifically for any one religion, because then they'd have to do something for all religions or something. I don't know. That I'm just speculating there. But when it comes to what you can do, when it comes, especially with SRP, what they allow you to do is they will allow you to do a connection of a solar panel system depending on the size, and they break it down in different categories. So anything under 300 kW. Now keep in mind what most people put on their homes is up to maybe 24 kW. All right. No one, I mean, that's a pretty big house, is 24 kW. This is for something up to 300 kW. So it'd be quite a bit larger than that. Between 300 and 1 megawatt, 300 kW and 1 megawatt. So that's 1,000 kW. And then anything over 3 megawatts. Okay, 3 megawatts is a lot of generation. That's a lot of electricity. I don't know what your loads are. They will not allow you to put more than 75% of your electrical usage though. Okay, so they'll tell you that you can only put up to that amount on a commercial basis. All right, because you cannot produce more than you, or you cannot produce more than you actually use or consume of their electricity. That's their policy. Does that make sense? It just kind of is what it is. The economics of it also get to be more expensive as you get higher up, and so you don't necessarily get your return that you're having on an investment if there's an investment in mind. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about this later when we talk about other ways in which commercial folks do things. Nonprofits can partner with for-profits a lot of times when they actually build a panel system on their facilities. And the reason that they do this is because just like there's a tax credit for individuals, an income tax credit for individuals when you put solar on your house, there's also an income production tax credit for companies that put it on buildings. But if you're a nonprofit, you can't reap any of those benefits because you're not paying income taxes, correct? So what they do is they have the system where you partner with a company that has a tax, that owes taxes, and they call it tax equity, and they flip the ownership between the two organizations so that you receive the solar panel system plus the generation, and they receive something that pays them to help offset the cost of their tax liability. And they call it a tax equity flip. It's a ridiculously complex way to solve a problem that bankers and lawyers love because they're the ones who, I sound a little cynical here, but you know, they make income, they make a living off of this. You have to set up a separate LLC in the name of the organization between these two companies to create this and then to take advantage of it. In the Biden administration, they're actually looking at taking it and going from a tax equity to have 501c3s simply apply for the grant money. And so then the tax monies that come in one door from the IRS are simply funneled over and turned into grants. And instead of forming separate companies, you simply apply for the grant. And if that becomes possible, then I think that would really greatly increase the amount of solar projects taking place. Because the problem, I'm going to go back one slide. The problem is that when you do a tax equity flip, the underlying costs of setting up the company is so expensive that it takes all the value out of anything under 1 megawatt. It's just too expensive on a per kilowatt hour basis. And so it means that only projects over 3 megawatts actually get built. And so there's a lot of space in between that would become more of an opportunity for folks going forward. And so I think that's, if you look at most rooftops whether it's over churches or parking lots or whatever have you, in order for most of us to actually economize that much, to create that much electricity, we would have to have a lot of our parking lots would have to be covered, not just our rooftops. Parking lots are expensive to cover because you have to build the whole thing to make a parking lot to cover it. Rooftops are relatively inexpensive to cover because you're just attaching them to the roof that's already there. Okay, are there any questions so far? Because we're humming along, so we're about done with the formal part of the presentation. We have a couple. Bill told me we have to do some dances or something in a minute or something. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
Something on the commercial ones, is the recommendation that the commercial project would also do battery and battery storage?
Absolutely. There is not currently a very good incentive as I've been able to dig in, however, for battery storage from SRP or APS right now. And so it would definitely be very beneficial. You know, the thing, if you think about churches, I don't know a day-to-day operations in a church. When I was at SRP, churches, you know, they used most of their electricity on Sundays, and they usually had offices and maybe a church school running the rest of the week. And so that SRP likes that because that's a different type of load than they normally have. So it keeps, when normally on Sundays, their electricity consumption goes way down. Well, at least this uses something on Sunday, so they don't have to turn all their power plants off. But at the same time, it does allow you to have, if you have battery storage, it would allow you to have lots of time to recharge your batteries to offset and use at other times.
Mhm. And so the solar companies would advise us on batteries and battery storage as well, that we would work with?
When you do one, you would do them together.
Mhm.
You don't have to, but I would definitely, that each system would have its own specific configurations. And so they do get tailored. Now, when you come to commercial installations, Tesla only does their online estimating for residential. When it comes to commercial, you still have to talk to a separate engineering group. They have to do a site survey. They have, you know, they'll do some stuff aerial and they'll go online and Google map your facility. They'll see what your angle of your rooftop is, and they'll estimate how much sun hits the roof during the day.
Mhm.
That's the very basic type of calculations that they can do online. And they're not doing it because they're smart. They did it because we spent money at the National Renewables Energy Laboratory years ago to do all this accounting for us. So there's the federal government has spent millions of dollars over the years creating systems to make this more and more efficient. So, but it can be done. They can definitely do that. You know, there's the part that the reason I put this picture up here, you know, is kind of putting the cart before the horse. It's important to understand what the market is, but I think it's more important to understand what your mission is. When I talked about the mission at with the group that I work with electric co-ops through the Access program, their mission, as stated, is to reduce the energy burden on low and moderate income members of their member systems across the country. Now, being in 48 other states or 47 other states in Arizona, there's a lot of things that they can do in other states. For example, community solar, which is where either the cooperative or some other group will build a whole field full of panels, and people from the community will go in and purchase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels themselves and get the energy allocation from those panels back onto their bill. That community solar can't be done though in Arizona right now. It's prohibited in great part because of SRP and APS and the way that everything's been structured. It's potentially could get even harder coming up in this next legislative session. A group of legislators has put up a bill to limit the ACC's, the Arizona Corporation Commission's ability to mandate renewable energy or anything other than set rates to the electric power companies. And that's strictly because 4 months ago, the Corporation Commission passed a new set of rules asking for an increase in the amount of energy coming from renewable sources. Right now, it's set at 15%, and they wanted to put it up to, I think, 50%. And instead, what they're doing is they're writing a law that retroactively takes everything back to June. And so it's, you know, it's Arizona. I don't know what else to say. So The opportunities are still there, though. There's still some things that we're looking at that may be able to work out. I want to finish this one bullet point, though, on this top part for the Access project. One of the things that I've learned working through Access is that when they do some of these community solar projects, and sometimes some of the cooperatives are actually putting panels on homes for individuals, that they're working with community action agencies to redirect WAP, which is Weather Assistance Program funding, and LIHEAP funding, which is I forget it's another acronym for emergency funding that goes to poor people during certain times of the year, to reassign some of that assistance to more permanent benefit projects, meaning panels and buying community solar pieces. The idea is that if a family is going to continually receive $20 a month in energy assistance for 5 years, why not just put it in a solar panel that gives them a $20 discount on their power from now on? You know, why continually just pay the same price instead of not doing something that's more of a permanent benefit? And in some states, Colorado in particular, they're making a lot of headway. Colorado and Minnesota. It's crazy that Colorado and Minnesota has more progressive policies when it comes to solar than we would, but it's kind of the reality that we're in. Now, the group I work with ACI, or the Arizona Cooperative Initiative, we're just trying to promote the cooperative business model. And, you know, I just want to point out, cooperatives have 7 principles as well. So just like the Unitarian Universalist Church, you know, 7 is just like, I guess, the right number for having principles. The last bullet point for CLIP, the Community Climate Livability Project, what we're trying to do is democratize energy production from we feel like it's a fairly radical perspective. If you look at what happened to the taxi cab industry with Uber, and not to say Uber is a good thing, but if you look at what it did, is it tapped into all these people who had spare time and had a car, and got them to go out and give a stranger a ride based on finding the right price incentive. Well, we think we could do the same thing if we got a whole bunch of people together who had solar panels on their homes and had batteries in their homes and had the ability to create enough electricity that we could dispatch that energy to people who need it, or to people who are willing to pay for it because it's renewable energy. And therefore, the people who have it on their homes would get a better price for that electricity than they would get from the incumbent utility. Right now, the utilities pay you around 3 cents a kilowatt hour for your electricity. And as we mentioned, if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if you produce electricity at 3:15 in the afternoon, and they're paying you 3 cents for it, but they're going to turn it around and sell it to your neighbor for 36 cents. And so you're subsidizing the utility in that case. The argument that's often made is that the poor people among us, because they can't afford the solar panels, are subsidizing us, not us, but because I don't have solar panels, are subsidizing the folks who install solar because they're going to continue to bear the brunt of the costs for the entire system. And the people who have solar are simply buying less electricity and therefore paying for less of the system. Now, a lot of this comes down to an inequitable way in which the rates have been designed. The cost causer is not the cost payer, but in addition, it also boils down to a misunderstanding that the solar panel members or solar panel consumers are actually costing the system more than they are actually benefiting the system. And the moment you couple your solar panels with a battery, you're greatly benefiting the system, And it's very, very obvious. When we talk about the democratization, well, what I would love to do is, whether or not people have joined our co-op or want to or whatever, someday I would like if we had 5,000 people, for example, I keep going back to this number, we had 5,000 people and we each had an 8 kW system, battery storage system on the side of their house, then that would be 40 megawatts of electricity. 40 megawatts is a lot of electricity. spread all across the territory, spread all across our region. And if we knew how much we each had at any given time and we could sell that back to the utility, then we could make an honest return on that, which would also enable folks who are low to moderate income to actually afford to buy a solar panel system because they'd get an honest return for it. And that's where it really, to me, it really starts to benefit more people, because it's not just the fortunate few, but it becomes many more of us that can actually take advantage of this opportunity. And I sound like a salesperson when I say take advantage of an opportunity. I don't mean that, but I do think that there could be a way in which people have an opportunity or have something that equalizes them across the spectrum. By having this type of system, by having people connected together and knowing how much electricity they have in their batteries at any given time, and having ability to dispatch that to people who choose to buy. In California, they have a program called community choice aggregation. And community choice aggregation is where the town or the city goes out and finds a contract with a renewable energy provider typically, and they'll sell electricity to anyone in their area, in their municipality or town or whatever it might be. And PG&E or Southern Cal Edison has to carry the electricity to their homes, but they get to choose how renewable they want their energy to be. They may have I think some of them have like a golden option, which means it's all local, even from California, the Golden State. Some of them have a light green option, which means 50% of that energy is renewable energy. Some of them have a dark green option, which means 95% of the energy is renewable. They have different costs, different rates. You choose the rate you want. But what that's doing is sending a very clear signal to the energy production people what kind of energy they don't want. And that's what, to me, is really important. We don't have that voice here in Arizona because SRP has 1 acre, 1 vote. And the people who want the renewable energy live on houses not on farms. If you lived on a farm, you would possibly be on the board of directors of SRP, but instead, we just talk about them from a distance. APS doesn't respond to it because they're owned by shareholders. And so there's a disconnect between what a lot of people want and what we're actually getting out of our utilities. And the sad part is that we own the utilities because we've paid all their bills for the last 100 years. And, if it weren't for us, the ratepayers, then the utility wouldn't be in existence. So, I guess, we kind of see rooftops as the same thing as an availability of a resource, just like it is with a car, with the availability of someone being able to give somebody a ride at a certain time of the night or the day. We just see it as something that would really expand the renewable energy opportunity market in our state and possibly give people more of a choice in how they want their electricity to be produced. I don't think most people care about who delivers the power to them, whether it's SRP or APS, but I think they really care about how much the power pollutes getting to them. So I think that's far more important to most people. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. So what's next? I think it's important to determine what your mission is and, how can we all help each other? We're trying to get the Corporation Commission to open up the market for community choice aggregation, because we feel like that might give us an opportunity to kind of create that Uber experience for electricity that we're kind of dreaming of. We're trying to we want them to have renewable mandates. We don't want them to go away from renewable mandates, but we recognize that it might happen. They may go away from renewable mandates, but we want to be able to make a market choice that makes renewable smart. So if y'all want to put in something for, to do something at one of your churches, I think that's a smart idea. How you want to organize that, whether it's simply owned through the church. Right now, the beauty of a community solar project in other areas is that, let's say, instead of the church owning the whole project, individual community members bought into it. And let's say also neighbors who, like, if part of your mission was outreach to low and moderate income, what if some low to moderate income families were invited to participate? And if that were to happen, individuals can actually receive a similar tax benefit when they buy panels on a community solar property as they would if they put it on their own home. And so then that creates a financial incentive that makes it more, that helps to share that benefit. And so I think that there are ways that this can possibly work together. Yes, ma'am.
John, how would that apply to renters? Our VUU facilities are in one of those low to moderate income areas. They're all our neighbors, a lot of our neighbors anyway, it seems. But there are a lot of renters. They don't own their homes. Could they participate in that, or their landlord would have to participate in that?
So that's a really good question. And, we've talked, I've been in a lot of discussions, including with this access group where we work across the country. And some of the neat ways that we've actually found to do this is that renters, like, if it's a rental property, is it single family or multifamily?
Single family, by and large. Somebody else may have a lot more input than I have on that.
If it's single family, then it can be done. The homeowner who's renting the property out would actually receive benefit from property appreciation, at least typically. I don't know what that neighborhood's like exactly, but there's usually a benefit to the homeowner because of that. If there's an offsetting cost, then the cost is typically going to be borne on. Well, it's more complicated. I hate to say it like that, but there is a complication in that property owners receive benefits that renters don't. And so then the question is, the renter actually just going to pay for the rent as normal and still have the same power bill, or is there going to be a passing on of that benefit back to the renter for any energy costs that's being defrayed?
Yeah, I would hope it would be the latter. It's going to be the renter who will benefit greatly from that income.
I agree. I hope so too. I just don't always know that. And so, like, the way we've kind of envisioned it with our clip is that we want to create representation within the organization for both the property owner and the renter. And so we would have a board of directors that would represent everyone involved, whatever type of membership classes we create, and they would all get some representation on the board, so they have a say in how the expenses are distributed and how money is returned. Ideally, there would be, if you form some type of a business entity like this where you help defray that cost, there'd also be some type of earning from that. You'd have to figure out a way of structuring it where it's fair. The person that owns the property is not going to do anything, though, that doesn't benefit him or her in some very direct sense. I'm not trying to sound jaded or anything. I just don't think it'll happen. The beauty of a community solar project is that you can live anywhere as long as you live on that community somewhere in that community system and be a part of it and get your energy offset allocated back to you somehow.
Yeah, VUU has great potential for that. We're surrounded by, come to think of it, those low to moderate incomes to the higher end of the middle income producers, probably.
That would be great.
John, Linda Ruhlman has a question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Hi, John. I was just
Hi.
wondering, when you talk about a community, how wide can that expand out from, what's the definition of a community in terms of one of these solar powered groups?
Well, that's a really good question, because I think in some sense of it, we're kind of here in Arizona. My old utility self goes back, and I think about how we're all connected through the electric grid. And SRP kind of has their areas divided into places and divided based on how everything's connected electronically. And that kind of can kind of go some way in defining the community. But there's two ways that I look at this. There's from the engineering perspective, and I'm not an engineer, just thinking about how the electric flows work. And then there's the financial perspective, which is more where I come from. The community, if it's a financial perspective, it could be anywhere just about, as long as they're like of the same. Everyone would have to be from SRP, or everyone would have to be from APS. You couldn't have a community based on both. At least I haven't figured that part out yet, but it seems very straightforward that would be that's a difficult thing to figure out. So why bother? I mean, there's almost 1 million homes in each territory. So, there's plenty of opportunity without having to go figuring out that, cracking that nut open. So I like the idea of the community being defined in regions, and that way you can build some community source around it, because what you also want to have is, with a cooperative principle number 2, or is it number 1, is democratic and open membership. And so you want to have this sense of it being community owned, and the sense of the people having say over what's impacting their lives. And so the bigger you get, the further out it becomes, the less impact that they may feel. And then it would actually start to hurt itself. I mentioned 5,000. That's just because the math is easy. 5,000 times 8 is 40 megawatts. And so I can do that math in my head. That's the only reason I went there. It doesn't mean that we need to have 5,000. I mean, we're looking at the beginning of all this, the nexus of what we were doing what Irene was mentioning earlier. My wife and I, we went around our neighborhood with some other volunteers as well, of course. And we went door to door before COVID. All this was before COVID. And we knocked on almost everyone's doors. And of the people, we have about 400 homes in our neighborhood, in our Broadmoor Neighborhood Association. Of the people that actually answered the door, about half of them were interested. So about half the people answered the door. About half of them were interested. And so that was, and we think that if they didn't answer the door, it's because they weren't there. It's not because they saw us coming. We're nosy enough to know that, but they're our neighbors after all. But we would get follow-up. We would leave information, and people would get emails out of the blue saying, please include me on this email list. And that really means people are serious about it. If you ask me, they go that step. And so we were getting flyers that we would drop off at one house and get copied and sent from a house in another neighborhood back to us. And so we ended up getting about 85, 90 people who were actually interested at this time in actually spending money to put a panel system on their home. So the biggest limitation we ran into with individual homeowners were trees. They don't want to cut down a tree so they could get more sun on their roof, which I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. And the direction in which their homes face. If they have a north-south orientation, it's great. If you have an east-west orientation, it doesn't work as well.
Can you give even a very, very rough estimate of, how much it would cost to put solar on I don't know, say a 3,000 square foot house, or 2,000, something like that? Or is it something you can't even estimate?
No, you can actually estimate it really fast. So the easiest thing to do, and this is what I do this all the time. I just go into Tesla's website. You give them your address, and it will calculate for you using that. I mentioned the program. It was called Watt Hub that came up years ago. That was created by the NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and will estimate almost instantly how much electricity they think they can produce from your roof. Tesla just has it on their website. You don't have to, you're not obligated to anything. You plug in your address and it'll tell you. Now the Tesla prices are Yeah, I've gotten estimates from Tesla and from Sunrun, which are both, so if you have a Costco membership, Sunrun gives you a 15% Costco cash card with whatever you spend. So that's like another $1,200, $1,400 off or something. If you don't have that, you just go with Tesla, then that's all good too. The funny thing is, when I went to Sunrun, they were saying, yeah, we'll put a Tesla battery with our system. And so I don't think they care. They just want to sell you the stuff, right? But okay, let's say we have a 2,500 square foot home, and we have enough space on our roof to put up about 18 kilowatts, 18 kW. And we had an 8 kW battery system they were going to install, and it was going to be about $37,000. Of course, they would break that down into 360 easy payments of $284 or $217 or something like that. I would just go on the website yourself and plug it in. If you go with someone who's local, you'll spend a little bit more, but you will get a product that might have a lot more electric generation than that one, because they'll probably tailor it more specifically to your home. So maybe I can't say for certain, but like the switch, the emergency interrupter switch that allows you to have generation in your house while the grid is down, that's something you would definitely have to ask for. In our neighborhood, oddly enough, we have a lot of residential homes with 3-phase power. Most people have single-phase power, but we have 3-phase. Tesla will not install anything on a 3-phase home. So we had to go, that's why I went to Sunrun, and I've looked at others. We have neighbors though that own companies. There's probably three companies in our neighborhood that do solar panel installations. We're just trying to find something that's more of a longer term relationship between the company that's willing to work with us, the people who want to put the panels on, and how we want to manage the organization, the cooperative going forward, because we also wanted to include services that go back. We wanted to include, like a maintenance options. We want to be able to, we want people to have access to their energy storage functions through a consolidated network, so that we can know how much electricity everyone has, not to be snoopy, but so we can market it and value it for what it's really worth. Because when you buy electricity from the power company, you're buying the cost of the coal or the gas that's being burned. You're buying the cost of the electric grid that's way out, going to St. John's, Arizona, on a big transmission grid, coming into the valley, where it loops around a 333 kV double circuit grid that circles around the valley before it even gets to you. And we don't have any of those costs that we have to pay for, and we don't have any of those costs that we're putting on the system. We're creating electricity right here that can go right to our home or to our neighbors' homes. And so it's a lot more efficient. It's a lot more economical. It's just, they don't own it. And that's what they don't like about it.
Thank you.
Sure.
What?
John, I had a question. Is there a concern over the security of the power grid today, to the point that having a battery storage for your house could be a real advantage if you had a power failure for a couple months in the summer out here, for instance?
Well, I wouldn't hope for a couple months, but yeah, but for a couple days, absolutely. Let's just be somewhat hopeful.
Okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we had it this past summer. There was a fire up in the forest between us and St. John's, Arizona, where where SRP has their Coronado power plant, and we were all asked to conserve power. We were told to cut back because we can't import enough coal power into the valley at that point. And I'm saying, you know what? That's perfectly good with me. I don't want to import more coal electricity. I just as soon turn it off and let's do our own thing. If you have battery backup, so you cannot run an AC system very well, because that takes so much electricity. An 8 kW or a 12 kW battery system on the side of your house can keep your refrigerator cold for 7 or 8 days, possibly. It can, you know, keep your, well, we don't need hot water in the summertime typically. It can keep fans blowing. It can keep, you know, everything charged up. It keeps all the lights running. It can keep most of the smaller stuff. It'll keep your microwave working. It'll keep most of your smaller stuff running for up to about 8 days, depending on how much energy you use. So you do have the ability to kind of go off the grid. I would never suggest completely cutting yourself off of the grid, though, because I think that, you know, one, I don't know if municipalities will allow it. Excuse me. I don't know if they'll allow homes to be disconnected from the grid on a permanent basis. If you live in a county island, maybe you could do something like that. You look like you're up in Pine Top right now or someplace.
Yes, Pine, Arizona.
Yeah. So why are you worried about 100 days without electricity down here in the valley?
We've got a house in the valley.
Yeah. Well, you know, we had 150 days over 100 degrees this summer. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we break another record next year.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the time. We're at a little after 4 now. And it seems to me that Valley Unitarian has 2 issues. One is to explore the best way and options for going solar, but also do it within the context that you kind of talked about of the larger commitment to the community as well. In other words, to not just do it for ourselves, but to also begin the process of working with other churches and other you know, organizations like Arizona Interfaith Power and Light,
Yeah.
to advocate for you know, those that don't have the resources, and maybe even to partner with those people. And you know, the bottom line is, how do we get to you know, ultimately, as I think I shared with you, the first question that I get asked whenever I bring up the possibility of Valley Unitarian migrating to solar is, okay, how much is it going to cost? And you know, and to me, from what I've learned today, that's just one very small part of the whole conversation. And so somehow we have to navigate figuring out how to have, as Deanne McClenahan, our board president, has asked, is that we start a congregational conversation about how to go solar in a way that is consistent with particularly our 7th principle. So I'm not sure what the, you know, so I guess what I'm asking is, wow, I mean, you've overwhelmed me today. What's our next step? How do we begin to navigate this so that we can bring it back to our congregation and start that conversation?
Well, I think that you've already started part of it. I think, you know, everyone's desire, besides just the desire to become more energy efficient or more green, I think you also, it goes back to, and the names keep popping away. I'm looking right at the lady that mentioned this. She's got a pen in her hand. She's standing like this. Yes, I'm sorry. I can't remember your name though. And you're on mute too. But anyway, yeah, the interest that you mentioned about the community around you. What was your name again, ma'am? I'm sorry.
Roberta. Nickname is
Roberta,
Bert.
okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. The idea that there are things around you that you could have impact on that could make it a bigger project, that could make it more meaningful to the community. And when you say bigger, I don't mean that necessarily you're making more panels for more electricity. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it's just bigger than something just for yourself. The truth is that you're not going to be, because of commercial rules, you can't put more than 75% of what you can generate on your rooftop anyway. So that's going to put you at a different number that I don't even know if you really need to generate as much electricity as your rooftop could support. That's one of the other calculations. But if you were to, and you made those panels or some benefit from those panels available to your neighbors, one of the big things that I've seen churches do that look at solar, and I can't say that I did this, I take this back. Let me say it again a different way. With the co-ops I've been working with, like for example, in Oklahoma, what they've done is they use solar panels, and this is in the middle of Oklahoma where everything is a gusher. They'll use solar panels to recharge battery buses, okay, battery school buses. And when a place has a tornado damage, they'll send 2 or 3 buses over there to help restore electricity, like in the hospitals or some places that don't have access to electricity themselves. So instead of building a backup generator, they just send in the buses. And so that's one way in which, and so think about that. That means you have a potentially a different type of option. You could do what I've seen people here in Tempe, what we've been working together to do is using churches and community centers as cooling stations. And why not have a cooling station run on solar? You know, I know you may not be able to do all of it with electricity, but you could certainly run the refrigerator that's got lots of water for people to have. That can be run on solar easily, you know, and having some type of place where people can just get out of the heat. We do that. We have, you know, like everywhere in the valley, I think we have a pretty good sized homeless population. Here in Tempe, they come into a couple of, during the summer times when the schools are shut down, they have access to some of the school buildings and stuff to get out, and the libraries and things like that to get out of the heat. So there's other ways of impacting the community that might fold into that. Tempe, we're fortunate, we have a community, we have a climate action plan that actually has where the city tries to attempt to make those contacts to move those things along. Whether or not you have that yourself, think you could maybe just want to think ahead and think, well, why don't we go ahead and do this and make the rest of the town look bad so they come along eventually, you know? I honestly, the city of Tempe, I think our group, I don't think they expect us to succeed, but they expect us to be a pain in the side of SRP. And so maybe we don't really become the company or the cooperative we think we're going to be, but if we end up pushing SRP down the road a little further than they wanted to go, then we all benefit.
Okay. So and probably this is going to have to be a longer conversation with you about, one, you know, just exploring VUU's options. And I like about, you know, what you've talked about relative to battery storage, but also getting us in at the same time where we don't lose sight of the larger, you know, the more community-based issues, and working with other churches while we do our own you know, transition to solar as much as we can within the current laws. So is that something we can, you know, talk to you about for?
Sure. You mean right now?
I mean, after this phone call.
No, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want to follow up with, you had mentioned it and I haven't called them yet, the gentleman from Interfaith Power and Light. I want to talk to them and find out more of what they're doing, because I think that they have, you know, they could potentially have opportunities in Arizona, if you want to build a cooperative, you need 5 people or 5 members or 5 something. And so, I mean, I could easily see 5 churches coming together to create kind of a business entity that has a social mission, whose mission it is to, there's an organization that's out of California, and it's called Grid Alternatives. And they have a social mission. They actually go around and help install solar panel systems on low to moderate income homes. But what they also do is they go into those communities and they find people who want to be trained in how to do this work, and they train them to do the installations. So they don't just go in there with their own team of hotshots. They train the local people on how to build and maintain the solar installation so that they'll take care of it from then on. And it also gives somebody who may not have had an opportunity to do something in that industry a leg up in the industry. It gets the bona fide training. And so to me, that's the same kind of thing. If a few churches came together and decided that they could, you know, regardless of what they may think about each other, they could focus on a mission that could be combined and unified under certain goals and certain benefits. You know, they could really bring in a lot of ability to, and first off, they could, you know, as 501c3s, there may be grant money associated with it, job training, different types of funding that could go in with it, besides the renewable aspect. You know, the renewable could just be the cream on the cake and not even be the cake. So it's really, there's a lot of, you know, again, setting up that mission, getting others involved. I think that there's a lot of opportunities there.
Okay.
No, yeah, we already have a connection with VIP, the Valley Interfaith Project, through all the work that we did for Prop 208. And is it Dwayne Luan? Dwayne Luan. He's
David Lujan?
Yeah, David. I'm sorry, David.
That's okay.
You know him?
Yes.
John, you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife used to work with David at the
That's right. Yeah.
at the state.
Mm-hmm. But he would be able to help us in outreach, I would think.
That's yeah, he would have a lot of contacts. Yeah, Roberta.
John, we are in the process of initiating a building program at VUU. We have already raised X number of dollars to do that, and kind of decided, you know, that's as much as we'll ever be able to raise. So we'll go with that. We have been in contact with an architect. I don't know that any kind of commitment has ever been signed with him, but that somehow we're going to have to work with that situation and our plans to carry through with this. Do you have any suggestions about how we can work that out?
Well, if what you're thinking, I mean, the first thought that comes to mind is just designing the building where you get the right consumption of electricity based on the rooftop alignment, but it also needs to fit what you expect your church to look like and what you want the flow of the church is from the parking lot in. All that needs to kind of flow together. I think you could, I think if it's designed with both in mind, it could be really a stunning building. There are technologies that are coming out when it comes to solar panels. And it's not that I'm suggesting them. I'm sure some of you have seen them. Tesla has their solar panels that are built into their shingles. Those are really nice. But, you know, if they were to do that, like Linda, you were asking about how much that would cost about $65,000 on that same house. But you have a brand new roof that lasts for the next 50 years. So there's maybe a benefit. You would definitely, if you could involve them in that process. And so you would need to find somebody that has experience in creating, you know, both the aesthetic and the proper engineering of the roof and everything so that it will flow together. There's a lot of other ways to reduce energy consumption. That one, you know, we always tell people the first thing you do before you put on solar panels is you put insulation in your roof. You want to make the envelope as snug as possible around your house. You you know, we're in the process in our own house of replacing these windows behind me because they're not energy efficient windows. My office becomes an oven, you know, sometime around, you know, end of May. And so that's the same kind of thing. That's the type of thinking that you have to have when it comes to your church, you know, with the building infrastructure. You have to have it where it's going to be designed with the right, just the right interior elements that you want to have from a aesthetic perspective, but also from an energy efficiency perspective. And, you know, big spaces are notoriously inefficient. You know, I'm sorry to tell you that.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you have that big space where it looks out the right way, and so the roof line structure faces the right way, you know, the big windows face north and the small windows face south, and the angle of the roof is such that you get mostly midday sun in the middle, but you also kind of, if you can have a little bit of pitch on the end that captures, that faces west so that you can capture the late afternoon sun, then sometimes you can get a really valuable amount of generation from the late afternoon sun, and that just benefits everyone around you. So I'm sure there are architect firms that have specialization in this. I would hope so. But yeah, there's a lot of little things to consider, definitely.
Yeah.
So, John, this is John from Church of the Palms. So
Hi.
we're looking at going solar on our church just, you know, to cut down on energy costs. But I'm intrigued by the concept of being part of a community effort to then provide solar to, or provide, I guess, benefits to low and moderate income homes in the community. We live in our church is in Sun City. So once we put the solar on, then how do you build that sort of that co-op that you've talked about?
So, you know, I think I want to be really clear right now in Arizona, it's a structure that we do in other states. Like, for example, in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and oddly enough in Wisconsin where they get lots of snow. But, you know, these more northern climates, these other states that have some more progressive rules. In Colorado, community solar is a really big project. Even in my home state of Alabama, there's community solar. We just don't have it here. The way that functions is that there's a relationship between the energy company that represents them and the church. And so when they put it on the church, some of those panels would be dedicated and actually maybe either dedicated or purchased on behalf of the low to moderate income families. And then they would be part of an offset where they would get a bill credit for the amount of electricity that's generated in their names. And it may be tied to the address. And the reason why it'd be tied to the address is if this is an area that has some transiency, so that the individuals near you receive the benefit, not the people who were near you in 1984, if that makes sense. So you just want, like, so this particular neighborhood, maybe these 20 homes over here have got a set aside from the church, that where there's an agreement that the generation from these panels in particular, say 5 panels per home or something, multiply that by 20, that's 100 panels. So 100 panels worth of generation gets some type of a financial offset to those homes. That's how they would do. That's how it's been done. Otherwise, what you're looking at doing is just simply making some type of a donation in those people's names in a way to the utilities to help them pay their bill. That I can't think of a more. I mean, you're simply writing them a check in many ways, and I don't know if that really gets you what you're looking for. You know, the idea, you need to have the relationship where there's a sense of both ownership and community involved. And so these other areas, because of how they can organize their companies, because of how they can have community solar more openly. It's also in Virginia, I think in North Carolina. There's a co-op in North Carolina that has a lot of history of where well, it's a long story, but there's a lot of problems between the races in North Carolina in this particular area. But this one cooperative is almost entirely Black owned. And so they've done a lot to go back into their community and share with their community what they've gotten out of it in the past. And so it's been, they're kind of like being held up as a model of how you re-engage with your community and reinvest back in the community. Again, that's from a cooperative business perspective. I don't know if I can really answer too many questions about what a church can do, because I haven't seen it. I think the community aspect in Arizona is most closely tied to, though, probably providing resources where they can get out of the heat in the summertime, where they can go to a place that's cool, where there's some place to maybe take a break in the middle of a hot day. That's definitely more, to me, that would be more engaging with the community, more personable. It's a lot more work. I don't know. Marcy, yeah.
John, I have a question that I'm not sure that you can answer, but people have mentioned doing a co-op or a community connection with not only the houses in our neighborhood, because I'm at Valley UU, but also other churches. And there are no other churches within a couple of miles. At least a mile and a half would be the closest one that I can visualize. I'm wondering if you think it's possible to find a company like it was not called Arizona Solar, but whatever you had mentioned, one of the local companies that would sell panels to multiple locations. If we would get a discount, if, say, for example, our congregation and the one from Sun City that's also represented on the call, if we put in an order together, even though it was two different locations, do you think that there's a benefit in attempting that and reaching out to other churches based on that?
Well, I would think that there would be some benefit to it, yes. I don't know how much it would be a benefit. I think that the other way of looking at the benefit is that if you think back to what I mentioned about the tax equity flip, about setting up the companies, and that's where the cost of a tax equity flip becomes high, you might be able to kind of get around the problems of a tax equity flip, though, by having one representation in 5 locations. So that might be where you actually receive benefit. And so you would have somebody who's related to your church who has a large tax liability. Right now, in this area, there's a lot of people who've been making a lot of money off of real estate. And so if they have a real estate company that they've done really well lately, then they may have a large tax liability and they may actually be looking for some way of offsetting that instead of just cutting a check to the IRS. And so what you would, find that intermediary that would bring you together, and 5 locations would probably be big enough to make it worthwhile, as opposed to 1 or 2 locations. So there's both sides. There's the cooperative piece from buying and sourcing and getting one company to do it for you. And then there's the creating that intermediary as well.
John, you mentioned in talking about your house that you have a 3-phase house. Tell us what those phases mean.
So electricity comes, if you look outside your house where the wires come in, or if it comes in underground, I can't really help you there. But most of us run our meters on what's called a single phase system, which means that there are two curves of electricity coming in at 60 hertz at a time. What I have in a 3-phase home is 3 phases coming in 60 hertz. And so it has nothing to do, it doesn't have anything to, it's a complicating factor. The history of our neighborhood where Irene and I live is, we're an older neighborhood. It was built in the 50s. Some of the homes in the 30s and 40s, but mostly in the 50s. And when we were built, SRP used our homes to do analysis and research on energy consumption. And in order for them to track our consumption and analyze it more closely, we had to be on 3-phase electricity. So it was just what they did for us, you know, it's not really a benefit. Now, it is a benefit if we ever decided to, say, run a machine welding shop. You know, if I wanted to build a car in my backyard with a welder, that would be very beneficial because the energy is more efficient when it comes to doing weird heavy loads like that. Now, it doesn't help anything in my house. My air conditioner is on 3-phase electric, and which makes it's supposed to be more energy efficient, but we haven't really found that it is. And it's just a standard up on your roof air conditioner. I think one of the things we mentioned earlier about how you can't run in your home, you can't run an air conditioner on 3-phase. There are those mini split systems. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but the smaller systems that look like they have air handlers in your home, those can be run on battery backup. You can run those, but they're more concentrated in 1 or 2 rooms of your house. And so again, if you did have a power outage, and the problem there is that our homes are insulated to the outdoors, not between rooms. And so you would still have a lot of energy consumption just to keep one room cool. But, you know, if you had that in your bedroom, that would keep you cool. You'd be able to sleep a lot easier at night. And so there's that kind of thinking. That would be beneficial, but otherwise you wouldn't. If you had a large air conditioner, a large home or decent sized home, 2,000 square feet or more, and you ran your air conditioner for an hour, it would probably deplete your battery just about completely.
Say, this is Jim Horton. Bert, the church has 3-phase power. All of our air conditioners run on 3-phase power.
That's very common for commercial. Yeah, it's very common for commercial to have 3-phase electric. And so that wouldn't, your installation though, that you would have in the church wouldn't preclude you from being able to use the solar to run your air conditioners and things like that though, because that's of a totally different voltage, totally different, you know, it's not like a standard 50 amp connection that you have on top of for your air conditioner like I have. It would be a much bigger unit or a series of units. You know, when you mention like I mentioned the mini split systems, you might have. I've seen several churches that will have all the offices that face the west will have their own mini split systems because they're more efficient. You don't have air being stuck in a duct, and you're not taking up space in your building with ductwork either. And so the mini split systems are more efficient for that. They're not as attractive in some respects. They're getting better looking, if that really matters, but those can be controlled much more efficiently as well.
So you couldn't run a kitchen, because our kitchen faces west at the church at VUU. With all those appliances, it's not possible to. Could you have 2 or 3 mini splits feeding into one room?
Well, so the mini splits are the air conditioning systems. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you can. I wouldn't. Don't ask me how to do that though. If you're getting your church built, you know, you want to look at that from that big picture perspective. Anything on the western side of the building, you probably want to have some series of entrances so that there's not a direct sunlight into the interior room. You may want the sunlight, but you don't want the heat coming in from the window. So you probably want some spacing or something that gives you like a heat buffer, so that there can be some airflow to insulate you from the rest of the building. There's probably a million different smart things you could do. And I don't know many smart things to do from that perspective. I think that
we'll find them.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got a lot going that I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to. There was something in the chat box. Shoot, I'm sorry. Is the co-op a way to get around the community source of ability in AZ? I'm hoping it is. I don't know if it's going to quite be there. I think that we're hoping that it can be used that way. So we're trying to appeal to the people who are driving the position behind the legislature to get rid of renewables. What they do want is competition. And so we're very happy with that, so long as we get to choose. The competition can be between generation resources. And that's where we're trying to position ourselves, where we're doing something like that. So
Just to provide some context, and I think we're going to need to also wrap up here pretty quickly. But currently, BUU spends about $25,000 a year with SRP. And how much could we reduce that bill if we were to migrate to solar with battery?
I don't know if I could answer that question honestly or very well, because I'm assuming you spent a lot more this last summer than you did the summer before.
Don't know. I just looked at the past year.
Probably so.
Okay. So much about what you spend is due to weather. And from one year to the next, the weather is the biggest impact.
Yeah, but let's just go with $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
If we were to go completely with battery backup, are we talking $100,000?
I can't honestly tell you. I mean, if you were to, I'd have to go talk to somebody that would have to look at your system. So spending $25,000 a year, because your consumption is not extremely consistent. We kind of talked about that. So your consumption would shift, but your consumption, if it's greatest on Sundays, those are off-peak times anyway. So that's when you buy the cheapest electricity. So your highest periods of consumption, is that not right?
Yeah, that's true.
No, it's not, because we have a school there 5 days a week.
But do you consume more for school than you do for Sunday services?
But we also have iHelp, so we're air conditioning that space when we have iHelp there.
Yeah, and that was new this year. But Jim, do you know what the breakdown is between the education complex and the sanctuary? The difference in electrical draw?
It's
Remember that, Jim?
I don't. Don't know that.
I've looked at the bills and they're almost identical. It's 50.
So it's $25,000 total though?
Total for both.
Is there a separate bill for the main building and then the buildings on the other side of the parking lot?
Yes.
We have 2 or 3. We have,
I've only seen 2, but
we have at least 2.
Okay.
Well, I can't tell you exactly. I mean, there's going to be some savings in the air condition, or some savings in what's taking place on the stuff on a day-to-day basis. You would probably save a lot of money this time of year because you're not running the AC at all, but you're also not going to spend any money on electric for lights or anything. All of your usage would come straight out of what you're producing yourselves. The question is how much all this system will end up costing. Again, that's why I kind of asked you the question about the mission. If your mission is to save money, then I would just go stick batteries in there right now and not do any solar panels, because that's probably the cheapest, most quickest way of probably saving money, depending on how your rate's designed. I remember when I was at SRP and I worked in the rates area, we had they designed rates very favorably for some of the churches for consumption reasons because of Sunday usage. That may be why you have 2 different meters or 2 or 3 different meters, so that they can segregate the Sunday consumption, which is a holiday period consumption, versus the day-to-day consumption.
Well, this all originally came from Bill and the environmental action team. So I think our mission is really a climate change and addressing climate change, and how can we impact or have an impact on that at our facility.
Yeah. So I think,
right, Bill and everyone else.
That was the origin, but it's also, yes, it is environmental, but I could also, clearly we have a lot of discussion to have relative to how does that affect our other missions. which is John I hadn't even thought of, but John raised.
Well, and I think that we probably would need to have an installer company come in and look at our facility before we could answer things like how much would it cost to have it done and how much would we benefit from it? Because as John has said, that's not his purview.
I do know a gentleman in Scottsdale that's done several churches, and he brags on LinkedIn and Facebook about saving them lots of money, but that's I don't know if that's always the case. His company has done some pretty good sized commercial installations.
Okay.
And so,
John, am I correct that you said that if we go onto the Tesla website, we can get a quick estimate of what it would cost to put solar on the roof of our sanctuary?
Yes, on a home, yes.
But not,
Yes,
not,
on a
not
house.
commercial.
Residential, not commercial.
Yeah, it's residential only, not for commercial. But is a sanctuary, is that where you're referring to the whole, to your whole church?
Yeah.
Well, the sanctuary is the main building, which I think is what we're talking about for solar panels. I don't think that we're talking about putting them on the educational and that group down there. But we've got one building with a flat roof where I think is what we're talking about having the solar panels put up.
The sanctuary is where we have like our services, like big open area. And it's a large building, and it's definitely has 3-phase commercial units and such on it.
I was thinking about the parsonage for a second. I'm sorry, not the sanctuary. I was thinking about like where, I don't know if you have like a home for the minister.
No, we don't have a parsonage.
Not anymore.
There's a tent in the parking lot.
Yeah. Let me see. Irene asked a question in the chat box about what bills to get rid of, and I had them pulled up, but I think I closed it. I can send that out to you, even though I do want to go ahead and find that if possible. Anything else?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think this is really, it opens up other possibilities for relationship to the community. And I think that's a real plus for us. I should think also with other churches, that we could get more action, or, in every way, political and otherwise, if other churches were doing some of the same thing. And maybe if we had a proposal that made sense to, economically and socially, that other churches might join in. They might not even have thought of it, or it hasn't been on their schedule like it is on ours. But I think that's very possible. So this is very encouraging in that respect, I think.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that, you have large pieces of property in centers of areas. And so there's a lot of opportunity to utilize the rooftop that you have. And it still becomes part of that community focus. At least I would think so.
Yeah.
I want to be able to answer Irene's questions, because if I don't answer them now, she'll come over to the house and start knocking on my door.
I know. Whenever you go walking by with your
It's
dog.
one of her gifts.
John, you don't have solar on your rooftop, your personal house now, do you?
No, I can't afford it.
Okay, and so what would it cost if you were to do it? What would it cost to put solar on your rooftop?
Well, if I were to do just solar for myself, it would be, let's see, after the tax incentives, it would be, I think, around $22,000. And if I did the battery backups, it would go up about $9,000 more, $9,000 to $12,000, depending on how much extra battery backup we put on.
So it would cost you $30,000 to put solar on your roof with the battery backups and so forth. So if we took that, your house, which you said is what, 2,500 square foot or something like that? Is that what you said?
possibly. What we're looking at is, so the way that they measure, or the way they figure out, they calculate how much money you're going to save, is based off of what Bill said on how much money you spend every year. But it's also the how much roof space you have. My roof is ideally situated to, the back of the house faces south. I have perfect angle, excuse me, for putting 25, almost 30 panels on my roof without any adjustment, hardly at all. I hardly even have to set them down. I could just use bubble gum and stick them to my roof. It's because I have a fairly flat roof too. So I don't know if that's quite fair if you're trying to extrapolate from what I would spend to what you would spend on the church.
Well,
Typically,
what I'm thinking of, it's going to cost us something to put solar on the roof. And if, you know, if it's going to cost you $20,000 or $30,000 to put solar on your roof, we've got probably 4 or 5 times the roof area to put solar on our sanctuary.
right.
So we're talking about, you know, 50, 60, maybe even up to $100,000 to put solar on a roof that size, I would think.
I'm trying to find this guy right now, because he does brag a lot about what he does.
Bonnie, go ahead and unmute and jump in.
I think we should say that we have a person at this meeting who had the foresight to put solar on their house about 10, 12 years ago, who has an electric bill of 54 cents a month. Does that help? I mean, she has a big house.
Good to know, Bonnie.
Yes. But the thing is, it's the payback period. You know, that didn't happen those first years.
Yeah.
The bill wasn't 54 cents for a lot of years. You had to pay up front.
Right.
That's $17,000.
How much, Terry?
That's $170,000.
Yeah.
70?
$17,000 is probably right.
17, yeah.
And how many years ago was that?
9.
10, 9?
Yeah, it was between 9 and 10. We're almost on our 10th one now.
So you've got some amount of upfront cost, out of pocket upfront cost.
I will tell you this year that, or really last year, I put another more than $1,000 into it for repairing and what have you after 8 or 9 years. So it's not cheap.
Terry, that sounds like you did a purchase. There are also lease options. So depending on what our mission is, if our mission is solely environmental, with reducing our impact with fossil fuels, then potentially one of the lease systems might be something to look into, because then that reduces the upfront cost.
I don't think we had that choice. I don't think it was available.
Probably not then.
My guess is that, you know, leasing options may reduce the cost in the upfront near term, but, you know, somebody's, you know, you're paying for that leasing. And so
My mother has a lease on hers, and she pays a lease fee, but also she does not get any of the sale benefits of her excess production that goes to, I don't know if she's SRP or APS, but that goes to the company, not to her. So that is the benefit that the lease company gets.
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
Interesting. So,
But she doesn't have a bill.
Again, it's like 54 cents or $8 in the summer or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it totally just depends on this, how your energy consumption changes over time. That's what most people see. Once they get used to getting solar power, then they start changing how they do things, because they recognize that they do it during the middle of the day when the electricity is being generated. They don't buy any electricity later on. I'm trying to see this gentleman I worked with in the past. He doesn't have anything like, well, I'm trying to see where you had projects. I apologize. So there's Dream City Church in Glendale. Let's see. Yeah, excuse me. I need to take this phone call really fast. I apologize. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead, John.
Yes.
Bill, I would suggest, as an outsider, not on your committee, I would suggest that there are a couple of things based on John's information that need to be taken care of. You know, first of all, why? Why solar? What's the mission in there? And then also potentially to have some companies come out and look at the location and see what the possibilities are to answer some of those questions. And then based on that, some decisions could be made about what to present to the congregation.
Yeah.
But need some more information.
Okay. I'll be
Yeah,
right
I
back.
think if we could also get a report from the other churches in the area that have gone solar, when they did it, and you know, what their reasoning was, and would they recommend it? You know, we
How are you
should-
going to find them? Like drive around and look and see
Well-
who's got panels?
I think through VIP, there must be some,
Reverend Doug Bland.
VIP or Valley Interfaith Power
what
and
I mean.
Light, not
No,
not regular VIP. The,
I mean,
the Interfaith Power and Light with Doug Bland.
Yes, there is, yes.
The
That would be a good
Surprise
one.
VUU Church has solar panels where Terry Sims is the minister, and they've had it for several years.
Oh, do they? That's
Yes.
a good piece of information.
All right. I just threw a gentleman that I know that's done a few of these. I put their website on there for projects, and there's the Dream City Church in Glendale, First Presbyterian in Sun City West, Dream City Scottsdale, Northwest Community Church, a couple elementary schools, actually several elementary schools, a lot of elementary schools. But they've done a lot of commercial sized projects, and I know from firsthand experience that they've done projects that are also done with like where they connect into the distribution grid or the transmission grid as well as the distribution grid, and that makes a difference in how much energy you're actually able to generate. So, and then I'm still trying to find the other thing that I want to help out, and I do need to run. That was somebody that I got to go meet in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
So I apologize. folks.
No, not at all.
Mark,
We've gone beyond what I thought we were.
I just wanted to say that,
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Irene.
but it's a Valley Interfaith project, Marcy, and they're very connected, you know, politically, so they would probably have a lot of information central. Valley Interfaith.
Right, but Arizona Power and Light is also an interfaith project that
Yes.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but VIP is all different churches.
Yeah,
so is the other.
yeah, and it was, yeah.
Joanne?
One like the idea of the outreach to the community and making solar power more available to many people. You could also really enhance the mission of reducing.
Joanne, we can't understand you.
Joanne, do you have two devices on there? Do you have your phone and another device on there? You're getting some feedback someplace.
Can you type it in the chat instead, Joanne?
Yeah. Wow, this has been a whole lot of information. So I guess that's what we have to do is it's been recorded, so we can look at it again, listen to it again, and find other answers that we didn't find the first time and other questions, and keep up with you, right, John?
Yes, please. I just threw in there this House Bill 2248 for Corporation Commission and Senate Bill 1175. I just threw that in the chat box. Those are the two bills that they're promoting in order to get rid of the Corporation Commission's ability to affect any type of renewable policies or mandates. Now, the Corporation Commission right now, as it stands, is split 2.5 to 2.5. This is how they've been describing it. there are 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats, but one of the Republicans actually was behind some of the renewable mandates that were from the last, prior to this election, or prior to they taking office. And so this lady, Leah Marquez from Tucson, she may actually still decide to be supportive of mandates. I don't know. Folks, I apologize. I do need to run, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, John.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
right.
Bonnie, do you have a question you want to ask me real fast? Okay. Thank you. Y'all have a great day. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
John.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Wow, Bill, that was a whole lot. I couldn't
Yeah,
have to get more intelligent about it by looking at, going through it again. So if you make it available, Bill, then I can listen to the whole thing again a couple times.
the plan is Marcy has recorded it,
Uh-huh.
and we're looking, I think John Durbin of the Church of Palms is no longer on the call, but he said that they can post it on their website. So
Okay. Well, we could post it on ours too, right?
Marcy, you need to speak up.
It looks like,
I was
there
just
she
shaking
is.
my head no. At this point in time, we do not have the capability to post videos. We only have the capability to post links to videos, which mean they then have to be posted somewhere else.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Can't you just throw it up on YouTube?
I could put it on the VUU YouTube channel.
Yeah. And then post that in happenings, so all the information we could get in happenings.
I'll send the link to Bill. Why don't I do that, Bill? I'll put it on YouTube. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay.
Joanne, were you going to type your question? Everything is very feedback right now.
Yeah.
Joanne likes the idea of reaching out to the community to make solar energy to more people, which would expand the mission and other areas of concern and the missions. Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
But the other interesting thing was the possible grants coming up for nonprofit battery storage systems. That needs to be watched too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found if I just click on what John Penry sent to us about the Corporation Commission and the votes coming up, that it pops up. So it's a website here, obviously. And so that's more information.
Okay, I have to leave now. This has been a great informational meeting. Thanks.
It really has.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Jim.
Right. I should leave very soon too. It's really time for me to go. So thank you, Bill, for just promoting this and organizing it, and getting it going for us.
You're
Where'd Bill
welcome.
go?
Go ahead.
I would love to suggest that for the meantime, we maybe focus on batteries for our location until we find out what our building program is going to do. Because roof lines may change in the building program.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've got to. My hope is that we can figure out a path forward in planning and discussing this with whatever committees within the church, make these decisions. And so that's going to be a big part of our challenge moving forward. So, in that sense, I understand what you're saying, Bert.
Yeah.
But
Very good. Wow. Well, thank
Lots
you.
to think about.
Lots to think about. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please let's communicate put down your thoughts in emails and let's keep the conversation going.
Right, right. Very good.
We will.
Okay, Bill.
Good program.
Very
Yes,
good.
excellent.
Very good. Very good information. Thank you,
Yeah.
Bill, for pushing this
All
forward.
right.